Hi again, this is Amreen and welcome to Read a Day Club. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of May. So let's jump right into it. The first one was Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. Now, if you've watched Christopher Nolan's Inception and loved the film, then you are so going to love Invisible Cities as well, because the whole time I was reading this book, it felt like a literary Nolan experience. So the author talks about 55 different cities, okay, and we have this character named Marco Polo. He's the one, he's an adventurer, so he's the one who describes his adventures to an emperor, and the name of the emperor, I forget, the name of the emperor is Kublai Khan. Both are the protagonists of this novel, and about the cities, they're all imaginary. Some seem real, while others feel more like a part of this dreamlike world or universe where, for example, you have this city of Fedora, right? So in the center of the city, there's a metal building with a crystal globe in every room. And when you look into each globe, you see a blue city, which is the model of a different Fedora, right? So you have all these blue cities in the crystal globes. They're all the different forms the actual city of Fedora could have taken if it were not what it was. So there's the idea of multiple possibilities. On the map, there must be room both for the big stone Fedora, the actual city, and the little Fedoras in glass globes, not because they are all equally real, but because all are only assumptions. The one contains what is accepted as necessary when it is not yet so, the others what is imagined as possible, and a moment later is possible no longer. And then you have another city, and now this one's called Adelma. You arrive in the city dying and then meet again and then find again the people you've known. So I think Calvino here is trying to put across the message that at some point in your life, the dead outnumber the living. And all of these cities have something in common. Some of the other thing, apart from their names, which I later read and realized were all women's names. So we have Anastasia, we have Zora, we have Chloe, we have Esmeralda, and there are so many more. And when you're reading about these cities, you sort of compare them to your subconscious mind. Even in the story, Marco Polo, the adventurer, he says that that cities are like dreams. Everything imaginable and even unexpected transpires in our dreams, right? And these events and possibilities represent something, maybe a desire, a memory, a fear, a secret. So just like our dreams, even these cities have an absurd etiquette, misleading perspectives, and everything feels like a disguise. It's all very poetic, the descriptions of the cities. And actually this is not the first Calvino that I read, although it's the first Calvino that I read and understood. I read somewhere on Goodreads, I think, that if you want to introduce your brain to Calvino's complex, confusing, multi-dimensional works, then you should do it through Invisible Cities. So I think now would be the right time for me to reread If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, which is actually the first Calvino that I read. So even if you haven't read any Italo Calvino, please start with Invisible Cities. Maybe it'll help. Some people are so used to solitude with themselves that they never compare themselves to others, but spin forth their monologue of a life in a calm, joyous mood, holding good conversations with themselves, even laughing. But if they are made to compare themselves with others, they tend to a brooding underestimation of themselves, so that they have to be forced to learn again from others to have a good, fair opinion of themselves. And even from this learned opinion, they will always want to detract or reduce something. Thus, one must grant certain men their solitude and not be silly enough, as often happens, to pity them for it. Now it's time to talk about Nietzsche's Man Alone with Himself. Barely even 80 pages. I think, if I'm not wrong, I finished reading this book in a single sitting. And okay, why are we not satisfied when life mirrors itself peacefully in a deep lake? The best is the deep quiet in which I live and grow against the world and harvest what they cannot take from me by fire or sword. So yeah, these are all Nietzsche-esque meditations on solitude, life experiences, philosophy of course, and just, finding peace and comfort in the little that we think has been handed out to us. And in the book I have marked many pages where I have written down read again and again. Here, let's see if you can read that. Simply because every time I read Nietzsche, I'm struck by how eloquently he talks about how much we damage, deceive, and ignore our higher self for the sake of being faithful to our ideals. The text in here is uplifting in the sense that Nietzsche has written about how we pass from one stage of life to another, and this could be the much needed faithlessness in or forsaking of our ideals and maybe even our flawed belief system. So he says that we can never go from point A to point B in life without betraying what once was, without suffering in return. I mean, after all, unlearning can also be such a painful experience, and I think that, and of course even Nietzsche has written about it in the book, that our convictions, that almost fanatical desire of the search for absolute truth will always lead us to defend and believe what we already know, what has already been taught to us. And he says that man wanted to be right because he thought he had to be right. But if only we would stop and question the very foundation of these convictions instead of just blindly giving into them, there would be so much more revealed to us. I mean, I would label this as a self-help book. I think everyone should read it, even those who don't read. So let's move on to my next read, which was Clarice Lispector's A Breath of Life. Now, first of all, if I could go back in time and ask my past self, why had I not picked up this book any sooner, I don't think she would have any justified explanation to offer. So, shame. Past self for not reading the book, but I'm glad I did now, because this novel is nothing like I've read before. Nothing compares to this book. Now, those of you who don't know who Clarice Lispector is, she was a Brazilian writer who died in the year 1977 at the age of only 57 and left behind these little gems of artistic, extraordinary, thought-provoking, introspective literary fiction. A Breath of Life was actually the last book that she wrote. No. The Hour of the Star was her last novel. Towards the end of her life, she died of ovarian cancer. So she actually wrote this book when she was seriously unwell. So, and sort of knew that death was near. So yeah, she talks a lot about death in the book, death and the passing of time. She refers to death as the justification of life, of living. And the narrative style is this stream of consciousness. So we have two protagonists, right? And they are the only two characters in the book. One is Angela, female, and the other is the narrator / author, who is a male character. And so Angela is this shadow self that he creates in order to make sense of his existence, his thoughts, his feelings, and there's this constant dialogue between the two that reads like a novel. Since I spoke about Nietzsche before this, I would like to mention that this book too gave me the feeling like I was reading Nietzsche-esque meditations, because even Lispector talks about, or rather explores, territories such as our identity, the meaning of life, what reality is made of, and the use of non-traditional forms of writing and grammar make the whole experience of reading this book even more stimulating and captivating, I should say. It's amazing and also so unprecedented how Lispector talks about the non-existent, unchangeable nature of time, about living many minutes within a single minute, about multiplying herself even in the most detestable moments, gathering even the most isolated parts of herself in order to reach that state of perpetual balance or strength. She says that I must begin by accepting myself and not feeling the punitive horror of every time I fall. For when I fall, the human race inside me falls too. To accept myself fully, that is a violation of my very life. So yeah, she's written a lot about many things in this book. There's about writing, about creating life, existence, and about how happiness, the thing that we run so much after, is, it's nothing but a mode of being where everything in life, even though not the best, seems tolerable. And like I said before, death is a very important theme. In the novel, Lispector ultimately links everything back to death. For example, here on page 155, but why this desire and hunger for pleasure? Because pleasure is the height of the truthfulness of a being. It's the only struggle against death. This sort of reminds me of Ernest Becker's The Denial of Death. Lispector says that every birth presumes a rupture. So how about I leave it at that? Please read this book, A Breath of Life by Clarice Lispector. It will make you want to read more, and read not only her works but also more literature, more philosophy, more psychology. So yeah, now the last book that I read in the month of May was Chekhov's play, Three Sisters. The first play by Chekov that I read was Uncle Vanya, also a part of this book called Plays by Anton Chekhov, and both turned out to be very, very moving. So roughly speaking, it's a story of three sisters. I love Russian names, yet I cannot remember them. Okay, so there's Masha, Olga, and Irina living with their brother. And of course, there are more characters, serious characters, amusing characters, disagreeable characters, but you know what? I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into that aspect. Rather, I want to focus more on the, the tour de force that is Chekhov's writing. Once again, his protagonists, in this case the three sisters, they symbolize so much. So we have hopes for and this undying belief in a better future. We have the longing for love, the complexities of love, the yearning for ideals, regrets, and what else? And yeah, most importantly, lives that are tenderly lived and lived in moments. So the three sisters want to get somewhere, but they don't get there. And honestly speaking, this is no spoiler because that's not what the play is about. Rather, the play is about, not reaching that metaphorical destination in the future. Some characters in the book are also always talking about how what seems to be important and meaningful now in the present moment will be forgotten over time. And so you see how time is such a monumental theme in the play. Everything gradually changes. Everything is already changing. The ultimate purpose of existence isn't happiness. Rather, it's the suffering that you pay as a price for living. And in that, you create life. In that lies happiness. So the play is about that and so much more that I don't know why I am finding so hard to put into words at the moment. you know, the thing about when you're reading Chekhov, you sort of absorb all the resoluteness of the characters, in this case the three sisters, because their life demands so much forbearance from them, and they keep meeting their fate's demands with humility. And it's because of characters like these that I read so much, because I feel that, you know, you can, this might sound absurd, but I feel that you can quench your thirst for life from their well of understanding. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in the month of May. There is not a single book that I spoke about in this video that I would not recommend, even if you've just started reading. In fact, I think all of these books will make you a better reader, because that's exactly what happened with me. You know, you have these phases. I mean, I have these phases where I just want to keep reading and reading and reading, and that's exactly what I did in the month of May because of these books. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for subscribing, and also thank you for messaging me on Instagram. Those of you that do, it genuinely makes me very happy. So yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye for now.